Let's do that hockey.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the next episode of Dobber Prospects Radio. This is episode 115. I'm your host, Peter Harling. Thanks for tuning in. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. Thanks for joining. I don't know what took you so long. It's 115 episodes, yo. Catch up. All right. So I am continuing on with my prospect rankings series. And today I'll be backtracking a little bit and covering the Columbus Blue Jackets. I kind of overlooked them a little bit when I had a scheduling problem with the guest. I just kind of moved on with the next team and kind of forgot to circle back. So I want to give a special thanks to Victor Nuno for coming back on and being a two-time offender, 2 times in 3 episodes. Victor, that almost makes you co-host.
Well, careful. We don't want to make Jesse jealous. But no, thanks for having me on. I must not have screwed up too badly the first time, so appreciate it.
No, the screw up was on my end. I was mispronouncing your last name. I mean, it's one thing to mispronounce hockey players' last names, but I mean, as a host, to mispronounce your guest's last name, that's a pretty unforgivable sin. And yet you came back, you forgave me. You've given me another chance. So appreciate that.
No worries.
All right. So if you missed the episode that Victor was on talking Detroit Red Wings prospects with me, you can find his work on the Hockey Writers covering San Jose Sharks. He's also affiliated and contributes occasionally to Fantrax, but you most probably know him from his own podcast, the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast. So tell me a little bit about what's cooking on there, Victor. Just kind of bait the listeners to check it out if they don't already listen to your show.
Yeah, thanks. So we don't cover like the weekly schedule streaming, redraft league kind of stuff. We kind of focus more on deeper leagues. We talk a lot about prospects. During the season now, we've been bringing on scouts that specialize in different leagues and kind of getting their updated takes on prospects, especially ones that you need to make decisions on in your fantasy dynasty leagues. And then we also have we're doing kind of a little analytics series. So we got one of the evolving hockey guys on coming up soon, and a couple other interesting guests. So we'll be diving deep into the numbers and what they mean and how to have them help you with your fantasy hockey league. So that's kind of what we're doing now. And then in the off season will be coming soon, Peter. It's coming, and we're going to be doing our whole team previews starting probably late April or May, because we got to do all 32 teams before September.
Yeah, the off season's coming. So is Christmas. It's only 11 months away now. It's January 25th.
Yeah, start preparing.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little Columbus Blue Jackets and specifically some of their prospects. So as I've mentioned on all the other episodes, I'm doing a top 10 ranking series for NHLRumors.com. You can catch all of the prospect rankings there. I'm up to the New York Rangers. So the podcasts are a little bit behind with the articles, but we'll get through it all, and it's good stuff. So the Columbus Blue Jackets kind of threw in the towel a little bit last season. They moved out some veterans, Nick Foligno, Seth Jones, David Savard at the end of last season. They replenished some draft picks, and their prospect pool, as we were kind of talking at the beginning of the show, isn't the deepest, safe to say. But they got 3 first-round picks in the draft last year, so that certainly gave them a shot in the arm in their prospect pool. And they got a core that's pretty young that they're building around. Patrick Laine, Oliver Borkstrand, Boone Jenner, Zach Werenski. They added Jake Bean. They got Adam Boquist. So, they got a couple of players on the roster heading into this season that were young, graduated prospects. And, so they're not the most exciting team, but they got some more kids on the way, and they got a young core that they're trying to build around. I think there's a little bit more mining for prospects to be done here, and they should land themselves around a top 10. They'll be in the lottery anyways, I think. Pretty safe to say this season going in. What's your assessment of the State of the Union in Columbus?
Well, I think I agree with what they did. They kind of took a look around and realized they needed to rebuild a little bit. And and play some of the younger guys, moved out some contracts, gave some opportunities. And I think that's nice when you see teams do that. They definitely have some decent pieces already in the NHL, so that's good to see. And yeah, I think they absolutely hit the ball out of the park in the 2021 draft. I mean, that was phenomenal. Their 3 first-round picks, I think they hit on every single one of them, and I think that they even did pretty decent with some of their later round picks. So yeah, I think the future is pretty bright, at least at the top of their prospect pool. I'm not sure that the depth is as good as, some of the other, like certainly Detroit or LA or Carolina, but at the top where you really want it to be good, I think it's very, very good.
Right. So Victor, you had a look at my rankings online, and you've come up with your own as well. So we can do a little comparison as we go through. So let's tuck into that. We'll start at the top. And I think we both agree that their top prospect is Kent Johnson. For me, it's Kent Johnson with a bullet. I really like him. He's got, I wouldn't say necessarily boom or bust, because I don't really see him busting, but the boom potential seems to be there, and that he can just be an electrifying player. And that's why I agree with you that they really nailed it at the 2021 entry draft, selecting this guy, because this is an element that I really feel like Columbus has been lacking in its identity since its existence. They've never really been a very sexy team, right? Like, they've never been very good. And they've really lacked star power throughout the history of their franchise. I mean, they've had some good players, but no one who is really an elite level highlight reel kind of player in the prime of his career that really jumps to mind. I think Panarin played there, but not for long enough. And this is an element that I think the team's really desperate to have, and I hope that they've found it in Kent Johnson. I mean, he's got silky smooth mitts. He toe drags and curls the puck with the best of them, and he's always trying to make exciting plays. And I think that's something that Columbus fans will really enjoy having if he can fulfill that level of potential. And I think that if he doesn't fulfill that level of potential, he'll still be a very good NHL player and produce for them and play in a top 6 role. So, the bust potential, take it with a grain of salt. He's not going to not make the NHL, I don't think, but he might not be an all-star player that has his, the hockey card favorite. They when Columbus comes to your Canadian city, they don't sell that player as the bait to get fans to come see him. So I like his upside, and I'm kind of curious to see what your take is on him.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and I definitely agree that he's number one with the bullet. I think that the next guy we'll talk about is also very good, but I think the upside is so high with Kent Johnson. And yeah, he's a magician with the puck. If you had to pick one guy, from pretty much anyone in any of these prospect pools to beat someone one-on-one, it'd probably be Kent Johnson. He's so good at that. And last year, when he only had the first season, and he's sort of more of a role player on that stack team, I was a little concerned about the boom bust, because I think playing the BCHL and dominating that league, he picked up a few bad habits, like trying to beat everybody one-on-one, not using his teammates as much. But that's really changed now, and I feel like his potential is boom or boom now. I don't think there's much bust, as you said. And, looking at hockey prospecting, he is one of the few players that went up dramatically from his draft season. He was at 38% star potential, now up to 55. And I mean, his comparables are pretty much all star producers, except for a couple of outliers, guys like Joe Sakic, Ilya Kovalchuk, Nazem Kadri. These are the guys that statistically he's profiling like, not saying that he will, of course, be Joe Sakic or anything like that, but I think the upside is there. And, one of the concerns was also like defensive play away from the puck. And you see huge strides in that this season. Like, he's really done a good job. I don't think that he'll ever win, a Selke trophy, but he will be, passable defensively. And he's much more, aware, engaged, and all that kind of stuff. And he's got the third most star potential of anyone in that draft at this point, and it's really close between him and Gunther. So he might end up being the highest upside forward of anyone in that draft, and I don't think that's unreasonable. At the time, I thought it was a little high that they went so high with him. And in our offseason draft rankings that Jesse and I did, I had him fifth for fantasy. So I was still pretty high on him, even though there are a couple guys I might have slid in earlier. But he's just been fantastic. 30 points in 23 games for Michigan. And yes, Michigan is a stacked team. And the other thing is, I don't know about you, Peter, but I definitely think he's going to be a winger at the next level. I don't know that he's going to be a center, but you really see the benefit of Ken Johnson having someone like Matty Beniers, a strong two-way center, to, just help him out a little bit. And he doesn't need that much help, but I think having a strong defensively responsible player on his line is going to make him that much better. Because like I said, he's not bad, but it just really helps out a lot. So if he doesn't have that, I don't know that he'll struggle a ton, but he may not be able to put up as many points as he can with someone like that. And the next guy we'll talk about may be that for him. We'll have to see who he plays with the Blue Jackets, but he definitely has really high first line upside, point getter, could be 70 plus, 75 plus point per game forward. He's not going to have a ton of peripherals, but a lot of good points.
Yeah, I like how he's trending up because I got him in one of my fantasy leagues, so I'm pretty happy about that. I was a little bit concerned that, he didn't make the Canadian World Junior team as a -1 player, as an underage player, right, in his draft year. But I kind of just chalk that up to the politics of the game, that he doesn't come from the CHL, that he was playing in the NCAA. He made the team this year for the whole 2 games. But yeah, he's trending up hard in the right direction. His point per games total was 1. He has 27 points and 26 as a freshman, and as a junior, it's even better, 30 and 23. His plus minus is plus 21. Sure, whatever, say what you want about plus minus. It's a garbage stat, but plus 21 is very good. And of course it should be good because he's on a really strong team. So they should score more than they get scored on. So, again, grain of salt with all that. But yeah, I like the opportunity for him to break in the NHL on the wing. For starters, for sure, it's easier for young players to play on the wing than it is at center. There's a lot less responsibility on the wing. So I can see him definitely starting there, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's just where he stayed, depending on what Columbus's depth down the middle is like when he's ready to play in the NHL. Kind of a similar role to what someone like Mitch Marner does for Toronto. So if he had someone who's a big, strong center that can drive the play like, Mitch Marner has in Toronto with Matthews or Tavares, then, that is a recipe for success I would like to see as a fantasy owner of Kent Johnson. All right. So the next guy, you kind of touched on him a little bit. We'll jump to him now. So we both agree with Kent Johnson, number 1, no contest. And we both also have Cole Sillinger at number 2. And that wasn't really contested for me either. I felt like there was a pretty big gap between Kent Johnson and Cole Sillinger. And then there's a pretty big gap after that as well. And Cole Sillinger, surprisingly enough, playing in the NHL right out of his draft. So that is a pretty good start to his career. Let's start with your take on Cole. What do you like about him? Because you were kind of alluding to him a little bit already.
Yeah, I think if you would have told me at the beginning of the season that the 3, 7, and 12th overall picks from the 2021 draft would make their teams and only the 12th overall would still be with their team come January, I think you could have won a lot of money on that bet because that's pretty unlikely. But Cole Sillinger just did such a great job. Technically he was the 11th player taken since Arizona forfeited their pick, but they call him the 12th overall pick. Anyways, he was 9th on my board from our summer shows. So I was really high on him. I think it's pretty absurd, actually, that he jumped from the USHL all the way to the NHL. I mean, that's like a multi-tier jump, but he was just so good, and I can't recall the last time that's happened, but when he came to camp, he was, the details of his game were what really allowed him to to stay, like defensively, all situations, he wasn't a liability out there. So I think that goes to show a lot. But also, I think some people might look at what he's done in the NHL so far this year, and 13 points in 36 games doesn't jump off the page, but you have to remember how many leaps and bounds he's grown by. So just doing what he's doing now is really impressive, and I think the point upside is still there. It's just the guy's just playing his first 36 games in the NHL, so you got to be a little bit patient. And the fact that most of his metrics are close to average is amazing. In fact, his expected goals against per 60 is almost a standard deviation above an average NHL player, which is remarkable for someone that young and new to the league. So I like him. He's got a tremendous shot. He's got a really good compete level. He's smart. When he's out there, you see him being in the right position, being on the right side of the puck, defensively. He was their top line center for like a really long time in Columbus and doing just fine at it. That blows me away that he was able to do that. So I think, the points are going to take a little bit to come in turn, once he has someone like Ken Johnson or more robust supporting cast around him to kind of offload some of the tough responsibilities. But I'm really high on Cole Sillinger. I think he can be, a really valuable forward in fantasy in terms of, being, close to that 70 plus point range, maybe not in the next year or two, but I think his upside is certainly there.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about him from a Columbus point of view is, he's the son of former NHL journeyman forward Mike Sillinger, who played in Columbus, and that's where he was born. So Cole Sillinger was born in Columbus while his dad was a player there. And so now he's, come and joining that organization as well. So I think that's really cool. And he's had a bit of an unconventional route to where he is. He played 2 seasons in the WHL, and then with the COVID situation last year, he found 31 games in the USHL, which I don't think it's a step up or down. I think the USHL is a pretty comparable league to the CHL. And now he's just made the jump straight into the NHL, which I wouldn't have predicted. So I think that's pretty impressive. And I like his game. He's got a good all-round game. He's got a really good work ethic and drive on the ice. He's got a very good shot, one of the better shooters out of his draft class. And he plays a good all-around game. So, good on Columbus for taking him, for the bloodlines and the heritage and all that. I think that'll resonate with the hardcore fans in Columbus. So that's pretty cool. So this is where our lists become divergent. You wrote your list like yesterday or today, and I wrote mine early in the season. So there's been a little bit of changes here. And so the guy I had ranked 3 was Lam Foudy. I probably wouldn't have him this high on my list at this point, because when I wrote the list, he was looking like, as a 21-year-old, this was his opportunity to break into the NHL. He played more in the NHL than he did in the AHL last season during COVID, and given that Columbus is kind of going in a youth movement, I thought that they would make room for him on their roster. But he's played almost entirely this season in the American Hockey League, so that's a bit disappointing. I like Foudy. You won't find too many guys that are faster than him. He is a burner. He's got wheels. He's got pretty good hands as well, but I think his upside isn't going to be in the top 6. I kind of see him as like a Todd Marchant guy, a guy that's going to get a lot of breakaways. He's going to kill a lot of penalties. He'll be a penalty killing specialist in the NHL if he makes it. At this point, I'm not really concerned or convinced that his NHL career is a certainty at this point. I think he's got some work to do, and the fact that he didn't make it this year is a bit of a red flag for me. So you had Foudy ranked 10th on your list. So obviously I'm a little bit higher on him. I was at the time I wrote the article. I'm kind of cooling on him a little bit. I'm not sure where I'd rank him now, but it's probably in the 6 territory. But you had him as a barely ranked player on your top 10. thankfully for him, it's not a very deep prospect pool, or he probably wouldn't have made the cut. Talk to me about Foudy for a little bit here, Victor.
Yeah, I actually didn't want to rank him, but then when I looked at the rest of the pool, I was like, well, I guess he's 10th because there weren't really a lot of other good options. So
by default,
yeah, Foudy, you were saved by like anyone cares what I think though. But in fantasy though, I think that's what I'm talking about here. Cause you're right. As like for the Blue Jackets, as an NHL player, I think he probably could be, I agree. He's kind of borderline now. He really needs to step up and decide what he's going to be. But yeah, he is really fast. And what's interesting is one of his comparables on hockey prospecting is John Madden, who I think a lot of us remember as that, strong defensive forward, got a lot of shorthanded points and played that role really well. But he was a replacement level points producer. And that's kind of what I think Liam Foudy will be. Like, he'll be a guy that maybe you'll stream here and there, but I don't think he's someone, unless you're in a super deep league and you're trying to chase those shorthanded points, it's someone that you'll want to keep. Because I just don't think his points upside is ever going to be there. Probably a bottom six forward, maybe middle six, but I a 45 points I think would be amazing for him in a season. So I just don't think that he's going to get there. And he doesn't have a huge sample size in the NHL, as you're mentioning, but 27 games isn't nothing. And pretty much all of his numbers are, half standard deviation below what you would want. So expected goals against, expected Corsi against, and goals against. So even defensively right now, he's not great, but maybe he gets there, and I just think that, he's someone who's kind of shown that he doesn't have a huge track record for points, and there isn't really a big upside there. So I wouldn't even want him on my fantasy team, because what are you hoping for? That becomes like if everything breaks perfectly, he's a middle six, 45 point player. I just don't know that moves the needle much. So yeah, I'm pretty low on him, just because, for fantasy, I don't know that it's ever going to amount to a whole lot, and everything has to go really well for him. So yeah, that's why I'm low on him.
Yeah, the last time I looked, there isn't a fantasy hockey stat or category for being fast. So that's a real knock on Foudy. Okay, so the next guy I have on my list made it all the way up to fourth on my list. So quick recap: Kent Johnson, Cole Sillinger, Liam Foudy, 1, 2, 3. Then I went with Yegor Chinakhov, at the time, the very controversial first-round pick of the Columbus Blue Jackets. In 2020, they selected him 21st overall, and this was the first non-live NHL draft. So I was at home watching it on TV, and they made the pick selection, and then the camera cuts back to the panel of draft experts, and they're all scrambling through their notes going, who the F is Yegor Chinakhov? Who is this guy? Like, no one had heard of him. He was, and you almost never, ever, ever see players come out of nowhere in the first round of the NHL draft anymore. I mean, that wasn't too unusual a long time ago, but the scouting community, the way it is now, and the amount of capital investment that NHL teams and emphasis that they put on scouting, it's pretty hard to find a player that no one's heard of. So I think this was a case where a few teams knew about him, and Columbus had it in their mind that someone was going to select him. So they had to pick him now or never, because he was going to be gone by the time their next pick came around. So in saying that, it almost sounds like, yeah, they might have, in their own words, reached a little bit on selecting him when they did. But I agree with the philosophy of, if you've got a guy in the draft that you want to have on your team, you go out and you get him. And if you have to pick him early, then you do that, because, revisionist history, you can go back and look through NHL drafts and see guys that were picked in the second, third, fourth, fifth, seventh round, or never drafted, that are better than guys that were picked in the first round or even the top 10. So just because he doesn't rank as a top 10 or a first round pick, if that's the guy you want, then, nuts, just go out and get him. So, since his draft, he's been kind of proving Columbus not wrong for selecting him in the first round back in 2020. So in his draft plus 1 year, he made the KHL as an 18-year-old, scored 10 goals in 32 games, looked really good in the playoffs where he had 7 points in 21 games, and looked good for Russia at the World Juniors, playing there. I don't remember what they medaled. I think it was a silver that year. He's won a KHL championship as well since then, and now he's signed his NHL entry-level contract, and he's come over to North America. And you would think that he'd break in at the American Hockey League level, but nope, played 1 game there, scored a goal, and he's been in the NHL for the rest of the season. So he's made the NHL. He's got 30 games played. So technically he no longer qualifies for my rankings, but like I said, I wrote these a while ago. So he's got 7 points through 30 games in the NHL. He's got a whopping minus 14. So, that's not a good looking stat on him, but 4 goals and 7 points in 30 games as a 20-year-old now, and he's 6', 179. What's your take on Chinakhov?
Yeah, so good points. I think it's important to remember that he was an overager too. So the reach seemed a little excessive, especially because it was right after the New Jersey Devils had taken Shakir Mukhamadullin. And so it was back to back. Who? What is happening? Mm-hmm. I definitely agree that there's a time. I agree with what you said, like get your guy, but also, there's a time to bet on upside and take the younger players draft eligible because the upside, the range of outcomes is higher. And there's a time to switch gears and say, you know what, it's fine to take an overager who's made some real progress. And I think that time is closer to the mid-second round, if not closer to the third. So I didn't like this pick. And sure, revisionist, you can look back and see some other options. But the problem is, I just don't think the upside was huge there. And I think it remains being not huge. But yeah, he has had some success. He won the Garden Cup, as you mentioned, with former Avalanche Cup winning coach Bob Hartley. So that was kind of fun. And many people were panning that pick. I didn't like it, as I mentioned, but half point per game in the KHL isn't nothing. And the thing is that he has a really big shot, and that's what attracted a lot of people, is he can really rip it. But the question was, what else can he do? And I think his game is evolving. He's better playmaker. He's being a little bit more deceptive with his shot. He has a lot of different shot varieties and types that he can get off that are accurate. So that's good. And he's improved his skating, which is a problem. So he's not a total defensive liability now, but it's still not he's pretty not good defensively still. And it's not like he's generating a lot of offense. He really needs someone to feed him the puck, and then, he can just hammer it. And without someone like that, plus they already have someone who's like that basically on the team, and that's Laine, right? So you have 2 guys who want to do that. And who's the one setting up all these guys and being the amazing playmaker? Well, Kent Johnson isn't there yet. So they don't have that exactly yet. But I feel like he's grown and he's better, but I just don't know that he's going to be someone that's going to consistently score more than 50, 55 points. And I think most of those are going to be goals. I don't think he's going to be getting a lot of assists unless it's just from shooting it, creating a rebound, and then someone hammering it home. So yeah, I'm not super high on Chinakhov. I think that there were definitely better options, and I just don't know that he has that much more room to grow, especially because, he's already in the NHL now and showing who he is, and who he is below average NHL comparables at this point. So I don't think the range of outcomes for being much more is vast.
Yeah, I wouldn't have picked him, even going in revisionist history, if knowing what I know about him now, going back in time to that draft, would I endorse that selection at that time? No, I would not. If you really had it in to get that guy, I guess I can kind of understand that. I probably would have explored trading down as an option, and increase my my draft currency with some additional picks later on. It's not like your prospect pool couldn't use the help. Okay, so that's Chinakhov. That's the top 4. Coming in at number 6 is the guy you had at number 4. and that is another Russian, and it is Kirill Marchenko. And he's a 2018 second round pick, so he's 21 years old now. He's pretty good size, 6'2", 181. So, you know, a little bit of mass there. And right now he's in his, I think, third full season in the KHL, and he's trending in the right direction. You know, he had 28 points last season. He's got 20 points in 39 games this season. Looks like he's been named to the Russian Olympic team recently as well. So that's a pretty nice little feather in his cap, to be sure. He skates well, gets around the ice nice and quick. He's got a good, quick, accurate shot. But he reads the play really well. I think that's perhaps one of his best attributes is his hockey smarts. You know, no liabilities with the other areas of his game. They're all good. But he seems to be a pretty smart hockey player. And this is his last season in his KHL contract. So I think it's pretty safe to say that Columbus would be wise and will do their very best to sign him to an ELC contract. Hopefully by the end, before the season ends, he can come over after the KHL season's done, because they start and finish before the NHL. So there'll be a window of opportunity for Columbus to sign him, bring him over, entice him by burning a year of his entry-level contract up, and then they get a peek at how he transitions to North America, and they also get him under contract and keep him out of the KHL for another couple of years because they'd have that non-transfer agreement. So you've got Marchenko ranked as your fourth guy. You go Johnson, Sillinger, Tarasov, and we'll circle back and talk to Tarasov in a bit. And then you go Marchenko and then Chinakhov. So you like him more than the other Russian option in Chinakhov. So talk to me a little bit about your assessment on Marchenko, please.
Yeah, part of it is the known versus unknown range of outcomes, right? I feel like we know a little bit more about Chinakhov at this point. So plus he's older, and you know the overager status and all that. And Marchenko was early on a little bit more of a high point producer in the KHL from an earlier age, and had some really great success. So I like that a lot. And you know he had pretty high NHL equivalency just based on his last season, which was the last one that goes into the hockey prospecting model. A lot of his comps are pretty high, you know, point getting guys like Mark Recchi and Brett Hull. I don't think he's that high. I don't think he will reach that potential. But the reason I have him fourth is because I feel like there's a broader range of outcomes, and some of those are pretty high. You know, 70-ish point player type. Fantasy relevant. There's a couple of things that concern me though, and so he's definitely more of a boom bust. We talked about Kent Johnson being a boom boom, but I think Kirill Marchenko is more of a boom bust because I think you said there aren't a whole lot of holes in his game, but I think that there's some issues actually. I think he's a guy who's really good with the puck, but he's not someone who uses his teammates super well. He definitely is someone who wants to do the highlight reel play, right? And kind of beat someone, put it in their feet, slickly move around them. And he's got a good shot, and he has good hockey IQ for sure. But it's like, sometimes he doesn't see the wide open guy right next to him, or, 20 feet away. And so that's a bit of a problem for me. He's also really not great defensively. He's not like horrible, but he's just kind of there. And he has a stick kind of there, but his effort is kind of lacking. Like he's basically one of those guys that's like always trying to, do a quick, poke check and stand someone up and then quickly go the other way, which, great for offense, right? But like that's going to drive coaches crazy, and he might get, not the best opportunity because of that. So there are definitely some things that concern me a little bit. We had a Russian prospect expert, Dylan Griffin, on our show over in the fall, and he was really not excited about the lack of progress Marchenko was making, especially with those sort of hockey IQ things and using his teammates well and all that kind of stuff. And he says he sees him more of as a middle six player. And I really, really tried to push him to say he could be a top six, and he wouldn't get there. So that concerns me a little bit, because he watches the KHL and he's been watching him since he was in the VHL and MHL, and a lot of those things just haven't changed. So the lack of sort of growth and progression in his game is a little bit concerning. But I still feel like the reason I had him for is because the potential is still kind of there. Although I agree with you that after Sillinger, actually after Tarasov, for me, things really kind of drop off and level off in terms of this prospect field.
Right. Yeah, in terms of a lack of enthusiasm towards defense, at least that is a correctable deficiency. You can teach anyone how to play defense. They either the will or they won't, right? They either have the will to play defensively or they don't. But you can at least teach it, and you can inspire players to develop the will to play defensively if they're not a total lost cause. If you don't have the hands or the offensive vision, though, or the cojones to try some of these, between the legs sort of spinorama type plays, if you don't have the cojones to try those because you don't want to look stupid, then, that's a problem too. So, there's potential there, like you said. So in terms of, fantasy ownership, if you owned him in a a full sim sort of league where you've got 20 plus teams in your league with full rosters and full 25 player prospect benches as well, and you owned Marchenko, what would be your stock on him? Is this a player that would be on your untouchable list? Would it be you can have him if you want to pay the premium, or you can have him if you give me something that's decent, or you can have him, I might drop him, you can have him?
Definitely not the last one. I'm not going to drop him until he at least steps into the NHL and sees what's going to happen. Because as you said, he signed a contract with Sky. This is always the issue with KHL players, is they often sign long contracts and they won't come over. Yeah. All indications are that he does want to come over, but we'll see. How does it work? How does he fit in with the team? All that kind of stuff. So until I know that, I'm not dropping him. I also, if someone believes some of these hockey prospecting numbers and comparables, maybe I'll send him a screenshot of my comparable here to Mark Recchi and see if he'll give me something really good. I would absolutely take that. I feel like I would be happy to take a pretty good up and comer young guy, high upside. Just thinking about the draft of Kent Johnson, someone like Dylan Guenther, be happy to take someone high like that. I'd also be happy to take someone who's younger and doing really well in the league, like now, like a Drake Batherson or something like that. I would even take that for Marchenko, because I just think that even though there is a high range of outcome that where he could be really valuable, there's also a pretty good chance that he just kind of flounders, becomes a middle six guy, and after a year or two goes back to Russia. So, I'd kind of rather get out now if I could get something really good, but I'm definitely not dropping him or selling him for nothing.
Right. It's always tricky dealing in green bananas, right? Because you just don't know. Okay. Next guy on both our lists is defenseman Corson Ceulmans. So I have him ranked actually, we both have him ranked 6th overall. So that's interesting. So my top 6 is Johnson, Sillinger, Foudy, Chinakhov, Marchenko, Ceulmans, and yours is similar: Johnson, Sillinger, Tarasov, Marchenko, Chinakhov, and now Ceulmans. So this was the third and final first round pick that Columbus had back in 2021, and I like him better than Chinakhov for draft value anyways. And in fact, I might even move him up on my rankings if I redid these now, just ahead. So Ceulmans is 6'2", 198, defenseman, and his path to the NHL might be why his draft stock was a little low, because he's coming out of the Alberta Junior Hockey League. So the Brooks Bandits is where he played in his draft year. And he only played eight games. And the year before that, he had 35 points in 44 games. He's committed to the University of Wisconsin. So as a freshman there, through 23 games, he's got 17 points. He moves really well. He's big. He's got a big, heavy shot from the point. So I don't think he's the most creative offensive defenseman on the blue line. So in terms of running a power play, I'm not sure that his vision offensively as a power play quarterback is there. But if you put him on the other as a right shot defenseman, if you put him on a point with a forward or another, offensively creative passing defenseman, that could be a good power play combination for them in the future. And he's not very, very risky defensively either. So he's big, he moves well, he's got, the physical size to his game, he's got a hard, heavy shot, and he's pretty reasonable defensively. So I kind of like the way that this player is built for the NHL, and I kind of like the way that he's trending and projecting towards the NHL as well. So I think they got really good value with the 25th overall pick. Where do you see his stock here? We both have him ranked the same, so I imagine you're kind of seeing sort of a similar thing here.
Yeah, I see him similar to the other defenders that they drafted. Another one on your list, one of them that you didn't rank, but I see them all in a similar kind of tier. I don't think they have a defenseman that has super high offensive upside, but I do like Ceulmans. I think that it was tricky to evaluate him coming out of the AJHL. I feel like that's always so tricky because the really good players look so much better than anyone else. And it's just like, what's going to happen? But when he was at the U18s for Canada, I mean, that's certainly a better comparison for the competition there. And he looked great and has transitioned really nicely to Wisconsin. So that all says a lot. That's a huge, I mean, AJHL to NCAA is huge. That's a massive leap. And of course, playing for Canada at the U18s was a huge leap as well. And he so far is handling that all really well. And I think that, I do a ranking of under 100 played games played on my for my show on my Patreon, and he's number 43. So he's pretty high. His peripherals are good. I just don't think the points are going to be there in a massive amount. That's the main reason he's not higher. But yeah, I'm loving the upward trajectory. I'm loving that as he gets to higher levels, his production seems to not really dip, and it actually goes up. And some of these players that, play well with better players, sometimes you can see that. And it seemed like when he played with his fellow Canadians at the U18, it was, he was great. It wasn't hard for him. He fit right in. And playing at the University of Wisconsin, he's been doing great so far. So we'll see how he tracks, and maybe there's more offense to be had. But I think between him and the other two, they're kind of even, and we'll talk about the other ones later. But I wish they had a super high upside offensive defenseman. But I guess that's just going to be Zach Werenski for the next decade.
Yeah, they're going to have to ride that train. All right, so that's the top 6. At 7, I have a guy that also barely made your top 10. That's Tyler Angle. I talked a little bit about him on your podcast when I was a guest on there a few weeks ago, talking about prospect risers and fallers. I had him in the risers category. Since then, he's kind of starting to slip towards the fallers. So Tyler Angle, 21 years old, 5'10", 172. A 7th round pick back in 2019. So it's not like Columbus has a lot of draft capital invested in him. He's come out of the Ontario Hockey League, and his point per game totals saw a nice, steady, and pretty sharp incline in his point productions as well. So 4 points as a rookie in 41 games, nowhere to go but up from there. Then he went 17, then he went to 44, and then he had 67 points. So just over a point a game in his 4th and final season in the OHL. Last year was his rookie pro season and in the American Hockey League, and in 23 games he had 11 goals and 24 points. So that is right at the top of the league, and as a rookie too, right? So that really got him on my radar far more than anything that he did in the Ontario Hockey League. And then I look back and I say, so where's this guy? Is he a late bloomer? Is he too old? Where's he coming from? And he's not too old, right? He was only 20 years old last year. He's 21 now, on a steady upward trajectory, 7th round pick. So I'm thinking here's a pretty good sleeper fantasy hockey prospect to you can probably add him in your league as a free agent for free. He's probably undrafted. If he was a 7th round pick in the NHL, if your fantasy draft goes that deep, that's deep. But now he's become fantasy relevant, right? So can he make Columbus Blue Jackets in his second season? He's 21 years old now. And if not, does he continue this upward trajectory and maintain his point per game pace in the American Hockey League? Well, at the start of the season, it was looking like he was going to be able to do that. But since then, he's kind of cooled off pretty hard. He's only got 4 points in his last 10 games. And in all, he's got 4 goals on the entire season and 19 points in 32 games. So his point per game production is almost in half. So that's trending in the wrong direction hard. And one of the things I wonder about his inflated stats, if you want to call them that compared to this year, is his impressive stats, let's say, in the American Hockey League last year. On the Dallas episode, Russ Cohen said something to me that I thought was interesting, that last year with the COVID situation and the taxi squad in the NHL, all the NHL teams were carrying an extra goalie. So basically pulled one of their top goalies out of the American Hockey League and threw him on the taxi squad, which really diluted the goaltending in the American Hockey League. And so that he feels that a lot of players had some inflated production in the American Hockey League last year because the goaltending was subpar. And this might be turning out to be an example of that. I still kind of holding on hope. You know, maybe he's playing through an injury right now and he's got like one hand tied behind his back, which is why his production's fallen off. I'd like to hear what your take is on him though, Victor.
Well, that take that you had about the AHL talent pool being diluted really hit home for me too. I think that's a super good point that you made, and especially when you see someone really pop off like Angle did in that specific season where he, you know, looked so good, and you know, someone who really didn't look amazing until his final year of junior. Usually, you can't expect a whole lot from, but yeah, I mean, that was good to see. And he's definitely someone that I wanted to keep my eye on, and someone that we talked about as, you know, put him on your roster and we'll see what he does. Maybe he can, this year being a little disappointing. I don't know that he has a huge point upside, but I think that he has a good defensive game that can lead to offense. And I really like that he's not afraid to take the puck, you know, into the middle of the ice, go into the high danger areas, you know. I don't know if that'll work in the NHL, but they need blue collar goals in the NHL too. So he's a guy who can absolutely do that, and maybe it'll be enough. I'm just not sure that the upside is there. So he's someone that's worth, you know, sort of like a speculative ad to see what he can do, especially because he's super close. Like he could get NHL games anytime, you know, and maybe it goes really well for him. We've seen some, you know, high scoring AHL guys have some success, but I wouldn't expect, you know, huge 50+ point output from him. I don't know that that's in the cards for him, which is why I moved him down on my list. But, you know, there's still a range of outcomes where he could be decent, and maybe he clicks with some of the high offensively talented players on this team, but I think he'll settle into a more defensive role if he even becomes an NHL regular, which is also a huge question. So I wouldn't be, you know, if you're looking at someone to drop in your leagues, he's someone who I think is a candidate for that. But if you can hold him until you at least see what he does in the NHL, I think it's worth it probably.
Yeah, he's creeping into the droppable range for me as well, even in the deeper leagues. Because he's hit the wall a little bit here. I try not to be too reactionary and short sample sizes here. You know, a whole entire season last year, he was better than average. He's been average this year. Just kind of wait and see. Like I said, if he's playing through an injury, then you'll regret that decision. The concern I would have, though, that kind of keeps him on you know, my hand over the drop him button, is he doesn't really have any particular elite level or better than average level skill, right? Like, he's not super fast. He's not super skilled with the puck. He's not got a great shot. He just does everything well, but nothing great. and nothing poorly either, right? Like he's reliable defensively and he doesn't have any glaring weaknesses. It's not like he's skating with ski boots or, he shoots the puck 3 feet wide and high of the net and it rims around and clears the zone all the time. He's sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. And I feel like you need to be better than average at something to make the NHL, because there's a lot of good players in the world. But if you can be better than average at something, whether it be your shot or your passing or your skating, or you can punch people out, whatever it is that gets you to the NHL, you got to have something, I think, that's really good. And I haven't seen that from Tyler Angle yet. All right, moving down my list here, going with number 8, Dmitri Voronkov. And this is kind of where I'm getting into the territory of my list where I had to put someone in the rankings. And that's kind of what happened with this guy. 6'4", 190, big Russian winger forward, 4th round pick by the Columbus Blue Jackets. Had a pretty good season in the KHL in his second season, I think it was, last year during COVID. 19 points in 53 games, made the Russian World Championship roster, made the Russian World Junior roster the year before, 7 points in the World Juniors, 6 points in the World Championships, playing for Akbars Kazan. In 2021, he had another 10 points in 15 playoff games. So here's a player who's kind of, started trending in the right direction pretty hard. This season, he's back in the KHL. He's made the Russian Olympic roster as well. But his points are starting to take a little bit of a hit. 12 points in 38 games. It's good. It's not terrible. It's kind of right around where he was last year, but a little bit down, 0.32 points per game. So this is a player that you didn't have ranked, Victor. You're just not a fan, eh?
I don't really see the appeal. Frankly, I think he's going to be someone who's a bottom sixer. I mean, if you want someone who hits a lot and might, make the team, then great, because he's hitting 1.5 times and under 15 minutes of time on ice. That's great. He's also nearly a block per game with nearly 3 shots. So he could have some pretty decent peripherals, but I just don't know that he's going to score more than like 30 points. So if you want points, I don't know that Voronkov is going to be your guy, but it could be pretty decent for peripherals. And if you want a decent depth guy that's gonna bang, then sure, you have worse options. But I don't know that his path is also super clear to the NHL, but certainly nice to see him named to the Olympic team. So we'll get to see him really closely on that large ice and center stage. It'll be good to get a little bit more information about him.
Yeah. I think we're pretty close to the same page there. I see some things that are intriguing there. I want to know more though. So the next guy I have on my list at 9, you had at 8, and that's I want to say he's Russian, but I don't think he is. No, he's Czech. So big Czech defenseman, and I'm going to say his name wrong. Stanislav Svozil. Svozil. I knew I'd say it wrong. Czech names I just don't have a tongue for them. Anywho, he's playing over in the WHL right now. He came across from the Czech to play with Regina. And he's a defensive defenseman, 1 goal in 27 games, 18 points, got a couple assists, made their World Junior roster, 2 games, take it with a grain of salt. So tell me a little bit about what you like about the Czech defenseman.
Yeah, Svozil is a really good real life defender. I think he has legit top 4 upside. He could even be a top pairing depending on how good all the surrounding cast is. What I really love about him is watching him just lay guys out, because he is physical and he will step up in the neutral zone, prevent those zone entries. He's also good down low and just really, really good with his hits. So if you want someone who hits a lot and might have some decent peripherals, and Svozil is a guy, I mean, he should play a lot too. Some leagues count time on ice, so something like that might be useful. He's great defensively. I'm just not sure how much offense there is there. But yeah, it is a little bit of a concern, I guess, just in terms of how many points will be there. But on the other hand, it's nice to see him come to North America and be committed to, playing here. And the Pats haven't necessarily been great this season, to say the least. And he's got 18 points in 27 games. So, I guess there's something to be said there. I think he's a guy who's very likely to play in the NHL. So like just comparing him to Ceulmans, he is very likely. I think his game is really refined and he's pretty much, there. And so that's nice. But again, the offensive upside, I don't know. Definitely good with the peripherals. So in terms of your fantasy league, maybe if they're scoring a lot, he gets in on some points there. But I don't see any of these guys as someone who's, likely to run a power play. So that's my only concern with him. But I could see putting him higher if there was more offense, but just because of that, that's why I'm a little lower on him, but in real life, very high.
Yeah. You're making your top 10 rankings here with a lot more of a fantasy focus on it than mine. Cause like I said, mine were for MyNHLRumors.com. So it's not a fantasy site. So I would change that a little bit. For fantasy rankings, he might not make my list anymore either. He kind of reminds me of New Jersey Devils prospect Nikita Okachek, I think is how you pronounce his name. Played for the Ottawa 67s, or Dominic Machine, another Czech defenseman who played a really robust physical game. Not an overly big guy. In fact, he was pretty frail, but that didn't stop him from laying out some devastating hits. But neither of those guys really have much offensive upside either. All right. So now we're going to talk about a couple of guys that I'm going to get a lot of your input on. So the first one is the guy that you had ranked 7th, and I'll let you take it from there, and you can pronounce his name because I don't know how.
I ranked him 3rd, right?
No, we'll circle back on Tarasov.
Oh, who are we talking about?
7th ranked Knazko.
Oh, right. Sorry.
That's cool.
Yeah. Knazko, Samuel Knazko is so he wasn't on your list, and I have these defenders basically in a group. I think that I would put them in a tier kind of similar: Ceulmans, Svozil, and Knazko. I think it's hard for me to say who has the most offensive upside. I think that's probably Ceulmans, but again, hard to say. Knazko might. He was a 3rd round pick back in 2020. What's exciting about him is that he's been a staple of the Slovak international team since he was 15. So he's been on pretty much every international team. He's a staple there. He went to Finland to do most of his development time, played in the TPS system, under 18, under 20, and that's where he played his draft eligible hockey. And then in December, just before the World Juniors, he came to North America. Oh, he's also going to be on the Olympic team for Beijing. So that's good. We'll get to see him there against some big, strong men. But he's been with the Seattle Winterhawks since December. That got interrupted by the brief stint at the World Juniors, and interrupted now because he's on his way to Beijing. But yeah, so he's been pretty decent for the did I say Winterhawks? Seattle Thunderbirds is who he's playing for. Just 10 games. I'm sure no one in Portland or Seattle would be upset about that.
You corrected yourself, so it's okay.
Yeah. So I reached out to one of my colleagues, Liz Child, who's really covers the WHL really well, and she said he's looked like a man amongst boys, and that he's been really good, but not surprising, and also in a very limited sample size. Not sure how much offense there is there. She says a lot of people over there are throwing around the comparable of Shea Theodore. I think a lot of people, when they see a strong defenseman in the WHL, they just want to compare him to Shea Theodore, but he's not. I don't think Knazko is going to be anything like Theodore. Frankly, I think that Theodore was pretty elite from early on, high point getter, high NHL equivalency, and Knazko just isn't that, I don't think. If he gets anywhere close to being what Shea Theodore is, I'd be amazed. So that's my take on Knazko. I think that his peripherals could be okay, not as good as Svozil's, but his offense might be better. I'm not sure. He's been really dominant in his short stint in the WHL in terms of his Fenwick, though. So I think he's someone who deserves to be in that kind of middle tier. And one of those three is going to emerge and probably be a top 4 or top pairing defenseman. I'm just not quite sure who it's going to be yet. And the reason I put Ceulmans higher is because he's younger and the range of outcomes is wider at this point.
Right. Well, Knazko's only 1% Fantrax owned, so there's a lot of ownership opportunity with him. And it sounds like this is someone I've been kind of sleeping on, and I missed out on him because I guess I'm in the 1% leagues that have ownership of Knazko because one of my teams has him. All right. So that brings us to the last player on the list. So your rankings went Kent Johnson, Cole Sillinger, Danil Tarasov, Kirill Marchenko, Chinakhov, Corson Ceulmans, Samuel Knazko, Svozil, Tyler Angle, and Lam Foudy. Mine went Kent Johnson, Sillinger, Foudy, Chinakhov, Ceulmans, Marchenko, Angle, Voronkov, Svozil, and I had Tarasov at 10th. So this is where we're going to have a chat. So I had him at 10th. I got him pretty low on my list, and I know a lot of people are pretty high on him. So I think I'm the outlier here, and you got him 3rd ranked on your list. I'm not arguing that he's not the team's best goaltending prospect. I guess I'm saying that he is. I guess I'm just not saying that I'm not sold on him. So he's kind of bounced around a little bit in all of the different Russian leagues, the MHL, the KHL, the VHL. He played in the Liga with Asset on loan and looked okay there. 11 wins, 17 losses, 272 goals against average, and under 900 save percentage. Played a little bit better last year in the KHL, 16 games, 11 wins, 3 losses, 2 ties, and a 207 goals against average. So that's pretty good. Finished the season in Cleveland with a 4-2-0 record and a 316 goals against average. So he's made his commitment to sign in the organization. So you lose a little bit of that Russian fear factor. So that's good. But it wasn't a stellar debut. And then this season he's played mostly in the American Hockey League, and he's got a 5-3-4 record with a 306 goals against average. And surprisingly enough, he's been recalled to the NHL and played 4 games. Hasn't won a game yet. He's 0-2. So I guess he's come in relief or been pulled. 240 goals against average though. So nothing on his stat line really jumps out and grabs me and says, this guy is a future franchise starting goaltender. He's a top 5 prospect, top 3 prospect in this organization. Other than the fact that he's 6'5". So convince me that I'm wrong.
Okay, I will.
All right.
So there's a few things I think that are important about him. Yes, he's tall, but that doesn't make you necessarily a great goalie, but it helps, right? He's actually 7th on my list of prospect goalies under 50 games played. And one of the things that I really love is Instat has this statistic, expected goals per goal conceded. So how high were your expected goals per how many you gave up? So anything over 1 is really good. And he's been over to well over 1 in every season he's played. So he's giving up fewer goals than expected based on that. And so that's really good to see. He also has been facing professional shooters since he was very young. And that is something that tracks to be a high quality goalie. So I think we've talked about this, or I've talked about it in other situations, but the CHL goalies playing and facing shooters who many of whom were never going to play professionally is not as good as facing KHL, SHL, Liga, even Czech League shooters from early in your development. So it just really helps, and he's been able to do that since he was a teenager. And yeah, some of his numbers don't look great on the surface, but some of those teams were bad. And so that's where the expected goals per goal conceded really helps. And yeah, a lot of his more recent AHL numbers don't look great. And not that you should read so much into 4 games, which is 175 minutes of time on ice, but his ability to save 3 goals above expected in the NHL against high quality competition is very impressive, as is his Delta Fenwick save percentage, meaning he's outperforming what's expected of him in his save percentage by a pretty dramatic number of 2.07. Anything, just above 0 is really good for that. So I think he has the potential to be a true elite level starter. And when you look at hockey prospecting, which tracks this based on save percentage, and again, I think that's the stat that the goalie can most control. He tracks to be similar to someone like Jake Ottinger, who we're seeing in the NHL as a high quality young goalie. In fact, a lot of his equivalencies are even better than a guy like that, on par with someone like Lukas Dostal. So if you like Dostal, you should probably like Danil Tarasov, because I think that they're kind of in a similar conversation. The main thing to consider is what the team will be when he gets there. And of course, we don't know that. But I think that he's going to be better than Merzlikins, actually. We'll have to see about that. Of course, Merzlikins already being here doing it has a huge feather in his cap. So I don't think that we can say that yet. But Tarasov is really big and he moves very well. He's very patient, but he can be athletic. I love his goal line posture where he basically just, 1 foot on each post. He's so big and flexible that he doesn't even really have to move. But when he needs to get a big push laterally, he can do that. And he tracks the puck really well. So he's usually in the right position and not someone who needs to overreact to different movements. So yeah, I think Tarasov, I'm sometimes skeptical of putting goalies high on these lists, but I think, Sillinger and Ken Johnson are just in that top tier by themselves. And then it's a few forwards that are kind of in that mushy next group that might have some upside, but just not sure about. So that's why I think Tarasov should jump all the way to the top, because he's a guy who, very realistically could be a starter in the NHL. He's already shown promise. And most of the other guys after Johnson and Sillinger have huge question marks, even though some of them have some upside. So I would gladly take Tarasov as the third if I was picking from the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Right. I think one of the things I like most about him is his opportunity in this organization, right? Like, he's a 22-year-old goalie, and you've got Merzlikins and Korpisalo who are 27. So they're not old. They're kind of right in their prime for goalies. So he can take a little bit of time developing. And what's his competition? Berube, Cam Johnson, Peter Thome. Not much, right? Like, there's not much there that scares me that I'm going to lose my job to these guys. He's younger than all of those guys. So that bodes well for him. I guess I need to see you play a little bit, because I like your goals versus expected fancy stat. That is impressive. One thing I want to know about that is who sets the standard for what the expected goals are, right? Like, where does that number come from?
Yeah, every one of these companies has a proprietary expected goals model. I know Evolving Hockey has one, Money Puck and HockeyViz do theirs. So yeah, it's a lot of it based on position and tracking the location. It doesn't necessarily take into account cross ice passes and the velocity and trajectory of certain things. So it certainly might have some flaws, but I've been using this for a while and looking at some of these prospect goalies, and I feel like it's led me to pretty good conclusions. So of course it's not perfect, but when you see someone I really like it, because sometimes you'll see someone's numbers and they look really good, and then you'll look at the expected goals per goal conceded and it'll be really low, and you're like, okay, maybe it's just a good team, it's overinflated, and oftentimes that does hold true. So it's good to it's just another piece of information. I wouldn't put all your stock in it.
Sure. Yeah. I don't agree in putting all of your stock in any one particular stat or eye test. It's a combination of all the information that you can get and other people's scouting reports too. I really put a lot of value in that, because someone who's watched Tarasov play 15 times this season, and then I've watched him play once, I'm going to put a lot of value in what that person who's seen a much larger sample size has to say about him. And I'm going to take that for face value for sure. All right. So that pretty much puts a bow on the Columbus Blue Jackets top prospects. I don't think we need to go into anything other than top 10 or honorable mentions or anything like that, because we've mentioned a few times that it's pretty thin at the bottom. So I want to say thanks very much to my guest on this episode, Victor Nuno. Follow him on Twitter, and his Twitter handle is at Victor Nuno 12, VictorNuno12. And go ahead and search out his podcast, Fantasy Hockey Life. The Twitter handle of that podcast is at Fan Hockey Life, FAN Hockey Life. Great show, great guests, great hosts, good content. It'll help you win your fantasy league. So that puts a bow on the Columbus Blue Jackets top prospects, episode 115. We'll be back with the next episode coming up in probably about a week's time. So until then, keep your stick on the ice.